Still talking electoral matters, operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission have arrested 14 suspected vote buyers in Utueke at Dawari playgrounds in Bayelsa State and at various polling units in Imo and Kogi states. According to the anti-graft agency, a total sum of 11,040,000 naira was intercepted from the electoral fraud suspects. They were arrested following the intelligence-driven operations that commenced days before the governorship elections in the three states. The commission said they will be charged to court as soon as investigations are concluded. At this time, joining me on the news is Kenneth Ikenwa, business, political, and social policy analyst. Kenneth, thank you so much for engaging us on the news.
Good evening. Thanks for having me on once again.
Kenneth, it's the 21st century, and in Nigeria's electoral process, we're still talking about vote buying, cash inducements, voter apathy, voter intimidation, and all whatnots. What is it with Nigeria's electoral process? Is it that it has not come of age? And is it also having an adverse impact from where you see it on the public trust, most especially when we have people moving cash around during electoral processes or periods like this to buy people's votes?
Well, that's a very compound and complex question, but I'll try to break it down. Don't forget, we're just about 63 years old. But yeah, some other nations that are about 60, 50 years old that seem to be doing better than us. Politics and democracy is about evolution. But the painful thing is that if we look back at our political history and go back to the 60s, it will seem as though that we are just evolving 1 minute away from 1960s. We're evolving 1 kilometer away from the 60s and 1 mile away from the 60s. Because you still find the pockets of violence, the pockets of intimidation, the ethnic bigotry, the religious, sarcasm and all whatnot that played out in the 60s still playing out now. So what factors may be responsible for this? Look at some indicators, and I'm sorry, I have to be quite academic here. When you look at the poverty rate of Nigeria, you begin to understand why people act the way they act, especially when it comes to politics, when it's so easy to give people 10,000 naira, 1 million naira to go and cause violence, and they go all out to do that. The same thing happened in the 60s, where we had Operation Wettier, and where you find out that we have built a political system that is not centered on ideology, but actually centered on political and personality cults and the cults of mediocrity. So as long as we keep having these personality cults, these political cults, rather than political parties and rather than proper ideology and proper arguments for winning elections and trusted into electioneering processes, we will continue to have this problem. And what does that create? It creates the biggest deficit that Nigeria is currently dealing with. And that is not a budget deficit. It's what I call the trust deficit. And it will continuously be there if we don't look at these indicators and bring them down as quickly as possible. In addition to this is the indicator of illiteracy. Now, the literacy we're talking about here is not that you've gone to school and you've come out of school. It's actually the proper enlightenment and the ability to engage in the discussion of ideas and, advancement of superior ideas. We don't find that in politics these days. We don't find that a lot in the academia these days. We don't find that even in the religious circles these days. And this is compounding our complex problem. And we are seeing it having another offshoot again of secular elections. I hope we can do something about this as quickly as possible before the system completely implodes.
We all hope that will be done. But then, Kenneth, most often than not, we discover that those who have been arrested for perpetrating electoral violence or malpractice at the end of the day are being set free. We do not hear of court cases and any of those elements being sent to court. Now, how would you describe the role of the EFCC in shaping the perception of itself and, of course, of the country when it comes to electoral cycles like this, and ensuring that government agencies are up and doing when it comes to ensuring that elections are credible in the country?
All right, I think I'll be an EFCC apologist for the first time ever. I think it is unfair to single out the EFCC for this responsibility. Now, all law enforcement agents and every agency under the security architecture in Nigeria are involved in this assignment. But I've been monitoring these elections across different, media, your media, and social media angles, and I will not speak authoritatively on anything I have seen. We'll wait for the results to be announced. But one thing is certain: we are beginning to see again the complicity, the compromise of some law enforcement agents in playing out the role, in playing out a script that seems to want to be favorable to either one side of the pendulum or the other side of the political pendulum. So it's not just about the EFCC. It's about actually educating the Nigerian people on the principle of sovereignty. Because the people of Nigeria are the people that you take from the Nigerian populace and recruit into the FCC. So if you've had a bad mentality before you became a member of any law enforcement agent or agency, you definitely will carry that into the agency that you've been recruited into. We need to have a complete paradigm shift, change the narrative about politics in this country, question the integrity of people that go into politics. Do they go into politics as a result of the desire to be of service, or do they go into politics as a result of the desire that is driven by avarice? Once we can identify these issues and replace the paradigm that most of us have grown up with, then we can begin to see a law enforcement agency or a law enforcement architecture that will be completely, totally, politically neutral and loyal to the Constitution of the Nigerian state and ensure that elections are free and fair. Right now, it can be thumbs up for law enforcement agents. They've done fantastically well in some areas. I saw videos of some, agencies. I'm not going to mention or give credit to anyone. I would not do that. But they were able to, stop a couple of issues here and there. Fantastic. But I think more can be done, and it should begin right from when we all get into the primary school and begin to have the political sensitization and political identity of what democracy is all about.
Well,
it will take an entire generation to get this right.
Of course,
and I think we're on that track.
Of course, Kenneth, I had to single out EFCC because I know they are in the eye and they're a major decider of electoral processes. And of course, we expect that they should be the ones working with security agencies to see that there's adequate provision of security at all polling units. But then let me just quickly throw this to you. What do you think can be done now in terms of education? Because you mentioned it earlier. And the reason I'm asking is because in a society where poverty has been weaponized, how do you expect any sort of education to create a paradigm shift? How do you expect people to have a change of orientation in a society where people are struggling, are finding it hard to make ends meet? How do we break that barrier? How do we create a balance?
I think the Nigerian populace are beginning to find a voice. One of the factors that has kept us where we are today is what I call the conspiracy of silence. Because hitherto, people would not have media, people would not have mediums through which they can express or even communicate to the larger world what is happening at the back door, or at the front door, at the front end or the back end during electioneering processes and during elections. Now, we thank God for the social media that some people are able to have a voice. But you see, the legal and regulatory infrastructure or architecture we have in Nigeria does not enable the Nigerian people to have a voice. So the first thing we need to do is to ensure that people actually have the freedom of speech and people have freedom after speech. Because no matter how much people are educated, no matter how much you try to change the narrative and drive a new paradigm, if people now realize that, okay, I have the freedom of speech, I have the freedom of association, and afterwards that freedom is taken away from me, that becomes a contradiction and creates perpetual strategic contradictions that will never let us make progress in this country. And I think the way forward is to revisit the Constitution, let there be freedom of speech and let there be freedom after speech. Then I will come out and say, as an educated intellectual, this is what I believe, this is what should be done, and I believe that my say will actually gain some traction. That is the beginning for Nigeria. The rule of law is greatly hampered in this country. The legal architecture, the legal framework is supportive to a great extent of some things that are strategic contradictions, and we need to start addressing that fast if we want to continue to build the country of our dreams.
Kenneth, Ikenwa, I would have loved to continue with this conversation. It's been quite robust and eye-opening. Thank you so much anyway for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been nice.